We're seeing a lot of what you'll hear called governance theater out there these days. Everyone's trying to be an AI security and governance expert, but in reality, most people are still, really trying to come up to speed. Most people are looking at, developing policies and looking towards the basically the governance and regulatory frameworks as opposed to really being in the trenches. And so one of the things that we've developed is you may have heard of a framework from Gartner called TRiSM. It's basically a framework for trust, risk, and information security management of AI systems. And so we went ahead and built out a 100% TRiSM compliant application. And so here you can see, again, this is runs in a Docker container. Probably at some point we will make it SaaS, but a lot of people want to be able to maintain this inside of their own environment. I know some people that are on the call are MSSPs, and so you'll see that this supports multi-tenancy. And so if we go ahead and jump into one of these MSSPs and jump into their tenants, we're going to see what we call AIRA, and so the AI risk assessment tool. So with this, there's three different ways that organizations are onboarded. One, you can see this jumpstart capabilities. So if, for example, if you're a startup and you needed to comply with like CMMC and SOC 2, you could go through this jumpstart, tell it which frameworks you need to comply to, and as soon as you execute it, it's going to go ahead and build out all of your policies and all of your controls that you need to align to those frameworks. Currently, today, we have 17 different frameworks that it supports and fully crosswalks. The second way that people can onboard is we do a lot of complementary CIS assessments. If you're not familiar, the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls, about 160 or so individual controls. We sit down, have a very frank conversation about where you're aligned, where you're partially, and where you're not aligned, and it comes back with a comprehensive report with a prioritized set of recommendations for remediation. That's all done through an Excel spreadsheet. And so we're able to import that Excel spreadsheet directly into this system. The third way to do it is through the wizard. And I'm going to show you what the wizard looks like. So with these different frameworks, we'll just go ahead and reassess. And so when we jump into these questions, if we say yes, that means that we do have that control. If we say partial or no, that means that we don't. So if I say yes, it goes into the control and evidence area. If I say no, it goes into the risk register. And so if I go ahead and write this out here, now we have all our controls. So with that, I want to jump back a little bit. Now that we've implemented all our controls, we're going to go ahead and define our AI systems. So if you're, again, familiar with the Gartner TRiSM, here we're able to create full-on model cards. So here you describe where the model came from, how it's used, how it's been trained, if you've done any weighting, who owns it, things of that nature. And then the other thing, auditors, like for the EU AI Act and the like, they want to understand the data flows through that AI system. And so here you can see an example of doing sentiment analysis where we're pulling an API with Apollo. Apollo is a source for leads in sales. And then we're transforming it. We're saying that basically we're running it through our CRM and making sure that the prospects or the leads are not already in our system. And then we're running it through AIRA's guardrails, which I'll show you here in just a second, which allows us to see bidirectionally what's happening inside of this transaction. And then we describe the AI model itself, what kind of outputs we're getting out of it, and where that output's going. And so with that, then if we look over at the guardrails, so the guardrails are basically work like a proxy. So you'll have some type of application, that may be a chat bot, it may be an N8N and workflow. It could be, React, pick your flavor. And then you basically proxy through the AIRA gateway. And so with this, we're able to deploy rules bidirectionally to, again, look at like data loss prevention and the like. But you'll see that some of these policies are unique to more of this type of deployment or use case. So, for example, looking at like prompt injections or looking at like there's toxicity or violence and self-harm, things of that nature. Generally you wouldn't be looking at that inside of DLP rules, but it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about how people are interfacing with your LLM. So now that you understand the AI system that you understand the data flows, obviously you need to be able to test it. So we have several different types of ways that we test. So the red team assessments are basically prompt manipulation. So it's a battery of prompts that are continuously updated that try to basically break the guardrails of the LLM. I think I have enough time to give you a quick comment about that. So, one of the things that we do is we use AI to help us look at our prospects for our outbound prospecting functions. And one time I reached out to a credit union and asked, I noticed that you're looking to go through a acquisition. It might be interesting to have someone like myself come in and do a penetration test, maybe a gap assessment so that you understand the tech stack that you're acquiring. And they reached right back out, frantic, trying to figure out where I had learned about the acquisition. So I told them, the way we basically do our research, we were using ChatGPT at the time. So I told them I'd try to find the source, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. I couldn't find it in ChatGPT, but come to find out, it was actually a valid statement. And they said they had not released it anywhere. And so, I was basically told the prospect, it either hallucinated and it was actually right, or more than likely, there was cross-tenant contamination. So I've seen that in the real. So just a side note on that. But with that, bias and fairness testing as well as explainability testing is really important. So these are standard battery tests. And so you may have a high quality LLM, but based on the types of RAG data that you've given it or trained it on, it may start to have bias or fairness issues. And so we're able to run those tests against this environment. Also, web assessments, needless to say, a lot of these are like Chat GPT or, chat systems and the like. And so we're able to run credentialed and uncredentialed assessments against that. But so now we kind of stood up our compliance framework. We stood up our AI systems. We described how they're being used. We've tested them. Now, obviously, we need to align to compliance. So remember, we walked through those questions, and the ones that we said that we satisfy, they go into this control and evidence area. And so here, we're able to document evidence for the auditors and for, whatever additional purposes, cyber insurance and the like. So, you could upload the evidence, have URLs, you can add notes and the like, but you may have heard or you may be interested or be actively looking at more like continuous compliance. That's where a lot of people are headed these days. So you can see this collect evidence button. So if I go down into the integrations, we have quite a few different integrations. From a connectors perspective, it looks like today we have 37. So what we've done with these is these are basically APIs that we can tap into. We've mapped what the API's telemetry provides to the controls frameworks that we support inside of the system so that with a click of a button, we're instantly able to pull all the data from these APIs and gather the evidence for upcoming audit, internal audit, whoever needs that information. On the opposite side of compliance, then obviously we have risk. And so one of the things when we onboard somebody, We will ask about the NAIC codes that they align to, their asset size, and a few other details about their entity themselves. And I'll show you why that's important here in a second. But inside of the risk register, remember this is anywhere we said we're partially or not aligned to whatever the controls are we need based on the frameworks that we're dealing with. We need to obviously triage or remediate. One of the things auditors hate is if you know you have an issue and you've marked it as on the risk register and that risk register stays dormant. So we're really trying to mitigate that here. So you can see you can associate this to an owner, a due date, or a view date, so on and so forth. And so that really helps put everything on the map as far as keeping things in check. There's a full workflow capability inside of here that it'll send emails. I'll also show you the governance calendar here in a second. But while I'm in the risk area, I also wanted to show you this. So, especially financial entities, I know there's some on the call today. They're always interested in the numbers, shocker, right? And so, as opposed to subjective, they want some type of numerical value to describe the risk. And so here, especially because we're so close to the tooling inside of the environment and as well as the risk registers, we're able to determine estimated annual loss based on Monte Carlo frameworks or formulas, shall we say. Equally, as far as risk reduction, you can see here, based on the types of risks that we see in the environment, should we remediate those risks, how significant that's going to be towards reducing our risk. So really useful from a risk perspective, from a cyber insurance perspective, overall governance. The other thing I wanted to show you is the governance component. And so here, like I mentioned, there's two ways that you can deploy policy in here. If you don't have policy, then you can kick it out through the jumpstart that I mentioned. The opposite is, let's say you're an existing organization, you already have a set of policies that have been approved and endorsed. Then you can ingest it with the AI ingestion capability. It'll use artificial intelligence to take your policies, map them to the control frameworks, and build them into the system for you. And so inside of these policies, if you need any details, it quickly, let me show you one other portal here real quick. It'll show you. It'll show you actually all the details and fully editable. So definitely very useful. I can tell you, I've had to do a lot of engagements in the past where people will hire us just to do the policies. And, those are pretty significant engagements, especially if you have to go from the ground up. Whereas we're able to execute right out the door. I did want to show one other thing before I move to the vendor management. I'm going to jump back over to the integrations. And so you can see inside of here we have webhooks similar to what we have inside of Shield. So if you have some type of issue that you need to instantiate like an N8N workflow or something like that, you're able to do that here. The other thing that's really valuable is this cloud providers. So we're able to connect to your cloud provider and understand about, cloud trails and all your configs inside of your cloud. And so back on the testing components where you may have heard of there's a whole industry cloud security posture management, CSPM. We're able to provide that type of functionality direct inside of the tool since we already have access. The other thing I definitely wanted to highlight is, especially we're finding in the credit union sector, the NCUA in particular, and other entities, but very much so, the NCUA has been almost more interested in what the vendors do with your data as opposed to what the credit unions do with your data, as far as what the AI systems are using that information for and how they're being stored, manipulated, transformed. And so we have a entire vendor management capability built into this as well. So you're able to basically create a set of vendors. You come in here and set up their assessments. If it's something like an attested report, you can just ask for those attestations. If it's something that they have to self-audit, where they have to answer the questions themselves, you're able to do that. You're also able to add your own additional questions if you need to. One of our recent customers also had the need. They're a large car dealership. They had in the back of their information security policy that they had an addendum that their vendors needed to sign, and so we're able to provide that as well. But with that, once everything's connected, then you're able to enable and invite people into a portal. And so this allows the vendors a centralized area to submit all their evidence. So it allows us to have single source of authority when it comes to all things vendor related. And let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, good on time. So let me just see if there was anything else that stuck out here that I really wanted to show you guys before we open it up for questions. And so this, you might be interested in this. So this is all the crosswalks. So, oh, one of the things that I didn't mention, or I guess a couple things that I didn't mention. One, in relation to the policies deploy least privilege. So if you say you have, let's say you have three different frameworks you're working with, and one of them says that you need an 8-character password, the other says you need a 12-character password, the policy is going to lean towards the 12-character password. So it's going to take the most restrictive approach.